So, Willie, first question would be, you've seen Andrew's presentation on the value of aviation. Looking back at the year, do you think that governments have appreciated the value that aviation creates in some of the policies and activities we've seen over the past 12 months?
Thanks, Sonia, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us in Geneva. I think it would be fair to say that not all governments fully appreciate the economic contribution that aviation makes. It does depend on where you are in the world. I find regions of the world where there's significant interest in expanding their aviation activities, not just airline connectivity, but also related industry. The one I tend to highlight quite a lot is India, where you were seeing significant growth in the Indian domestic market, and you will have seen the aircraft orders announced by Indigo and recently by Air India, and the ambition that these carriers have. And those ambitions, I think, are founded on realistic expectations for the way the market is going to grow. You combine that with the investment that the Indian government is making in airport infrastructure, and what you can see there is a clear recognition that for India to fully exploit the economic opportunities that exist there, they will heavily depend on air connectivity. They also recognize that there's significant related industries, particularly MRO, where India can take advantage of the skilled labor that they have, and we're seeing quite a lot of interest in developing maintenance repair facilities in India as well. So I contrast that with the Netherlands, where still today the government is trying to restrict the movements at Schiphol Airport, which in my opinion demonstrates a clear failure on the part of the government there to understand the importance of the hub airport and the connectivity, the value that creates for the Netherlands, not just in terms of the direct connectivity that Amsterdam has that they wouldn't have if not for the hub activities. I think it really does depend on where you are. So I think these studies highlighting the full socio-economic benefit of aviation, not just of the airline industry, but of the wider aviation industry, are very important. And it is very encouraging when we travel to different parts of the world and see governments that are very ambitious and keen to generate the benefits that many regions of the world, including Europe and the US, probably takes for granted because they've had these benefits for so long.
Okay, great. Thank you, Willie. Over the year, we've talked a lot about how the industry is growing and growing quite healthily. Do you think that the infrastructure is keeping pace with the needs of the industry and the demands of travelers and shippers?
I think it's clear that the air traffic navigation providers have not kept pace with the growth in the industry, which is disappointing given that they had an opportunity to reset during the COVID period. The COVID period was interesting in that it demonstrated the full value of the industry's ability to fly from A to B without reference to any ground-based navigation aids, because there was pretty much no restriction in terms of where aircraft could fly. So we were able to demonstrate that the technology exists, as we've argued for many years, that aircraft are equipped. We've invested significant sums of money to ensure that we can do that. The restriction we face continues to be the if you like, fragmented approach to air traffic control, particularly in areas like Europe. To some degree in the US, although the issue there is slightly different in that it's principally around the resources available. But we are seeing significant parts of the world where I think there is scope for enhancement in ATC, which would facilitate more capacity, facilitate shorter journeys, better environmental performance, lower cost. And it's disappointing that we've not seen those opportunities being taken advantage of. Airports I think after the very difficult period following the resumption of growth coming out of the pandemic, to be fair, most of them have got their act together. But it's clear that airport infrastructure in Europe in particular is not keeping pace with the projected growth that we see. That's different to the Asia Pacific region, where we're seeing significant investment in airport infrastructure. So again, I think it depends on where you are in the world. The biggest frustration, and maybe you're going to talk about this or ask me about this, is with the supply chain, in particular in relation to the airframe and engine manufacturers, which is causing huge frustration on the part of the industry. And I think that's probably a bigger impediment at the moment to the infrastructure that we've traditionally talked about, because without question, the disruption to the supply chain and the failure on the part of Boeing, Airbus, GE, Rolls-Royce, Pratt & Whitney to deliver the products that they've promised is a cause of major concern, because despite the fact that it doesn't appear to be getting any worse, there's no evidence of it getting better. And we now see this disruption continuing for quite a number of years. I've listened to people saying that they don't believe the OEMs can get back on track until the end of the decade. And that's assuming everything goes in their favor. So I think that's going to be a major challenge for the industry going forward. It certainly was a factor in 2024 and did restrict the growth that a number of airlines pursued, because they didn't have confidence in their ability to operate the fleet that they have because of the limitation on spare parts, but also very little confidence in getting the aircraft that they'd ordered. So I think that's going to be an issue. Certainly was an issue in 2024. I think it's going to be a big issue as we go forward.
Okay. Then maybe another look at a potential constraint on the industry is we're working in a world now where significant amounts of airspace are closed to airlines. We've also seen in some cases a rollback on some of the screening equipment that's in the airports. How would you characterize the year in terms of how we're approaching security?
Yeah, I think again it demonstrates the resilience of the industry. The change in the security arrangements, we were all looking forward to the removal on the liquids restriction. It was unfortunate that there was a, if you like, I'll call it a hiccup, because we still fully believe that that issue will be resolved, and certainly the evidence available to us suggests that the equipment is capable of screening to the required level, but it requires some adjustment, and that work is ongoing. So I remain optimistic that we will see the liquid restrictions removed in due course. The closure of airspace has put significant pressure on the available airspace. But again, I think the industry responds very quickly to any threat of security implications as a result of the various unrest that we've seen in certain parts of the world, the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza, the issues in Lebanon, and then what has been happening in the wider Middle East as well. So all of these issues have put quite a bit of stress on the infrastructure, and we've seen airlines having to respond by reducing their network and their schedules. A number of European carriers, as you know, have decided to reduce their presence in China and certain other parts of Asia as a result of the closure of Russian airspace. So it's been a problem, but I think, again, great credit to the airlines in demonstrating their ability to overcome these challenges and continue to exploit the growth opportunities that have been available to them.
Okay. Another topic that we've talked a lot about over the past several years, in fact, is gender diversity in the industry, and IATA's had its 25 by 2025 initiative. That will come to a conclusion next year. How would you characterize progress in that area across the industry?
Yeah, I think the progress has been good. It's clear we will hit that target, and I think that's pleasing to see. it's probably been a little bit accelerated in 2024, which again is good. It can't be the end of the story because we recognize as an industry that access to talent, recruiting and retaining people is a challenge for every industry, but it's a particular challenge for our industry given the lack of gender diversity that has existed. So we continue to look for opportunities to demonstrate that this is an industry that is attractive to everybody. We haven't made as much progress in the areas of technical skills staff, pilots, mechanics, engineers as I would have hoped. I think the period of the pandemic damaged some of the progress that we had been making. But there's a clear determination on the part of the industry to continue with the progress that we've made because we recognize it's something that we have to do. For our industry to be successful in the future, attracting new talent into the industry is a must-do. And given the perception of our industry being male-dominated in a number of critical areas, which I think reflects the reality of the past. I'm not so sure it reflects what can be the future, because without doubt there is no reason why we can't see greater proportions of female pilots, female mechanics, female engineers. We just need to convince people, both men and women, that there's opportunities for women in these roles and to continue building on the progress that has been made in recent years. So I think it's a good story. I think setting that target of 25 by 2025 was a good initiative. It's not just about ticking a box. I think it's about changing an attitude and changing the culture. And attitude and culture change can take a long time, but I think we're on the right road. And I'm optimistic that we'll continue to see improvements as we go forward.
Okay. Willie, you spoke about change. Looking back at the past 12 months, I think we've seen a huge amount of political change around the world. A new European Parliament, new administration coming in the US. What do you think those changes will mean for the prospects of the airline industry going forward?
Yeah, 2024 was clearly a year of very significant change. I think we've got to look at this as an opportunity. I've been talking quite a lot recently about the Draghi report, which I think is very important. Europe does need to recognize, and I think this report was a public recognition of the need for Europe to be more competitive on a global scale. I've been critical of Europe for many years with the fixation on competition within the single market, and often at the expense of Europe's competitiveness globally. And I think the report by Mario Draghi highlights both the risk and the opportunity that exists there. So I'm hopeful with the change in the Commission, with the change in the Parliament in the EU, that there is an opportunity to change the direction of travel and to address these significant issues. I think if you look at the Trump administration the first time round, you would have to acknowledge that was positive and supportive of the airline industry in the US. I think President Trump moved very quickly to secure the survival of the industry there through the CARES Act. And that certainly helped to stabilize the US industry well ahead of any other airlines in the global operation. So if you consider the airlines that benefited from the CARES Act support, they're clearly in a strong financial position today. I think the approach of the Biden administration to regulation has been worrying. It probably mirrored the appetite that Europe has for introducing regulation. It seems that there are politicians in certain parts of the world who believe the answer to every challenge is to regulate. I disagree with that. I think in many cases the regulations that we've seen have been unhelpful and have not benefited consumers or the industry. And I believe at this stage the indication is that the second Trump administration is likely to reverse some of the actions that were taken under the Biden administration. And I would see that as a positive. So I think there is a role for regulation. We've always acknowledged that. But over-regulating or regulating to address every single issue makes it a very complex industry, and I think regulators have not fully appreciated the damage that many of these regulations do to consumers and undermines the potential value, economic value, the socio-economic value of the airline industry. So as I said, looking at this, I think you'd have to hope that this is a positive on a net basis going forward into 2025 and beyond.
Okay. And just one more question before we ask Marie to come and help us look ahead into 2025. And that would be on, I think, the industry's biggest challenge right now, which is decarbonization. Do you think over the course of 2024 we made as much progress as you were hoping? Particularly, do we have SAF at levels that we were anticipating, et cetera?
No, we're not making as much progress as we had hoped for, and we're certainly not making as much progress as we need. While we were waiting to start there, I was just reading the report from IATA, which just came out in relation to SAF in the EU, and I think the executive summary is that there will be sufficient SAF produced in Europe to meet the Refuel EU requirement of 6% by 2030, although it does challenge whether there will be sufficient synthetic fuels being produced. Again, I don't think this issue is being addressed in a coordinated fashion by politicians. I think they believe that by making statements and passing laws and regulation that the issue will be addressed. There's little evidence that that is the case. I'm not as optimistic as IATA is in their report that the EU will be able to meet the requirements by 2030. And even if it does just happen to meet the 2030, I think the 2035 and 2040 targets are going to be extremely difficult to achieve unless there's a change in the approach. We had seen significant progress in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act, and there's clear evidence that that has incentivized the additional production of sustainable fuels or investment in the facilities to produce sustainable fuels. We need governments to recognize that they have a huge role to play in this. This can't happen just by the airline industry on our own. It must involve everybody, every player, in ensuring that we can achieve our critical target of net zero in 2050. And we need to start building on the slow progress that we've seen. We had expected that to improve in 2024. We're not at the levels, even though those levels are very, very small, but we're not where we had hoped to be coming towards the end of 2024. And we need to see greater awareness on the part of governments around the world of the role that they must play in ensuring that we can get greater production of sustainable aviation fuel. And it is important to point out that although we talk about sustainable aviation fuel, we're not just talking about fuel that will be used for the airline industry. It's these facilities will produce sustainable fuels that will be and can be used for road transport and other industries. So we're not asking for facilities to be developed solely to produce SAF, because that would be inefficient. So this is not just about the airline industry. This is about the transition, the global transition to a net zero economy, a net zero world in 2050, with sustainable aviation fuel assisting the aviation industry. But the same facilities that will produce sustainable aviation fuel will be producing sustainable fuel for road transport and for other industries. And I think that bit has been missed. I don't think there's been a full acknowledgement or a full understanding that that is the case when we're talking to some regulators and politicians who believe we're asking for something special for the airline industry. We're not. We're just asking for the same support as other industries have achieved in their transition to net zero.
Great, thanks very much, Willie. With that, I'd like to invite Marie Owens-Thompson, our Senior Vice President for Sustainability and Chief Economist, to present her outlook on the industry going into 2025.
Thank you very much, Tony. This is a room full of journalists, and I clearly need help getting the mic going, but I don't need to tell you how important the news cycle is and how turbulent it is on a daily basis. And we try in our analysis of the global economy and of course our industry to somehow slice through that to a certain extent and find the dominant factor that will drive us forward. And what is sort of the dominant factor in 2025 that is radically different from where we come from? And we would purport that that dominant factor is the lower price of oil. Now, this is where we are at the moment. The blue line is the nominal price of crude oil, and in red you have the real price of crude oil. So that is obviously the price of crude oil minus the rate of inflation. And basically, we are now $20 lower than we were a year ago and than we were earlier this year as well. So $20 is not an insignificant move. And I would argue, based on econometrics by the eye, shall we say, that around $80 is a bit of a cutoff for the impact that the oil price has on the global economy. Above $80, the oil price is, generally speaking, mostly negative for the global business cycle. And below $80, it flips and becomes much more positive for the global business cycle. So here we are, clearly having made a shift from where it weighed on growth to this current state where it now is more growth supportive. And two major things have happened here. So first of all, there is a structural change going on, as was, of course, mentioned also by Willie, where the demand profile for refined products is changing. And notably, China is switching its long-haul truck industry to being fueled by gas, liquid natural gas, a non-refined product, which reduces the demand for diesel at the refinery and has weighed on the price of oil products, obviously. So China is obviously not the only place where this is happening, but it has a large impact because of the size of the economy. And the other big thing that has happened, also weighing on the oil price, is another thing that Willie mentioned, which is, of course, all these elections that we've had this year, none more important than the US election. So the drill, baby, drill mantra is, in all likelihood, going to continue to make sure that the oil market remains oversupplied. And this is why we have these lower oil prices. Now, for once, we think that this is actually going to benefit not only the global economy and support a stable growth rate, but it will also benefit our industry because thanks to the vacated production space at the refinery, when people now produce less diesel, there is more space at the refinery to produce jet, and that helps the price of jet fuel to come down. So here you see in yellow the price of Brent, in blue the price of jet, and in red the difference between the two. So we're very grateful for having returned to some $15 a barrel difference between the two and that brings us back to sort of the more normal historic range of somewhere sort of between 15 or between 10 and $20 a barrel. And we have, hopefully forever turned our backs on this crazy period in 22 when the spread was as high as $60, and that was obviously very penalizing for our industry. So this is on balance good news. And as I have mentioned, it will help stabilize it puts like a floor under the global GDP growth rate. Now, that floor has been very much provided by the labor markets, the red-hot labor markets that we still have in most places. Yeah, record low unemployment rates, more people work in the global economy than ever before. But that is likely to wane a bit. That support is going to lessen going forward. And we are, again, very grateful that we then think that the oil price can replace that and make sure that we deliver a growth rate in the vicinity of 3% for the coming years. So capacity constraints then were also mentioned earlier, and they are unfortunately something that will probably prevent us from deriving the full benefit of this stable growth rate. And here, these data are aircraft deliveries by region produced by Cirium, no shade on Cirium, but what they do is that they just take the undelivered aircraft numbers and push them out to the next years. Yeah, so there's no real analysis in those forecasts. And I would say that the 25, 26 numbers shown here are very unlikely to actually occur. So when airlines can't get aircraft, obviously, given our already record high load factors, it's going to be very difficult for airlines to maximize on the otherwise reasonably positive global backdrop provided on the macroeconomic side. And not only do these delays prevent us from maximizing the services that we provide, it also prevents us from renewing our global fleet. And renewing the global fleet is, of course, a historic quest for our industry. Ever since our birth, we have strived to fly more efficiently, using less fuel. That is obviously in our self-interest, and on top of it, it is also necessary for us to be able to arrive at net zero CO2 emissions in 2050. So all of these bottlenecks in the supply chain are preventing us from doing so. And therefore there's this horrible choice that if I want to serve my customers, I need to bring back an old aircraft into service that I thought that I was going to retire because I haven't received my new aircraft. So this is clearly not the choice of the airlines that we now have the highest average age per aircraft that we are seeing on this chart. Yeah? The average is 13.6 years, and we now exceed that with 14.8 years average life of the current fleet in 2024. So this is another way in which our supply chain is preventing us from achieving our goals as it currently stands. Nevertheless, traffic is solid given this reasonably favorable macroeconomic backdrop, and we can see how, of course, we had very strong growth as we came out of the pandemic. That growth rate has moderated as we go forward, but the red line here is the international that still has to come up a bit. The domestic has led throughout this period since 2022. And now we have a new little phenomenon, which is that cargo has actually flipped above domestic. So that's great that cargo is back after a bit of a lull over 22, 23. So in total terms is what you see in the dotted line. And per region, this is what it looks like in terms of the growth in passenger on the one hand in blue. RPKs stand for revenue passenger kilometers, And in red, you have the growth in cargo per region, and CTK stands for cargo ton kilometers. This is the way that we usually measure our activity level. So here you clearly see that Asia Pacific is, leading the whole industry in terms of the growth rates on both cargo and passenger, and the Middle East is also making a very significant contribution in terms of growth, notably on the cargo side. And the more mature markets are obviously lagging, giving us a whole industry performance which is in the low double digits, but still in the double digits, which I think is, of course, absolutely phenomenal. And this little extra boost to cargo that we just saw, where cargo has again flipped up above domestic traffic, is very much connected to this evolution. So this is the relative price of air cargo versus maritime shipping fees. And you can see that we're now sort of in the same degree of competitiveness, of relative competitiveness, as we were during the cargo heydays, if I can put it that way, in 21. So as this curve goes down, air cargo becomes more competitive compared to shipping, yeah? And as it increases, shipping becomes more competitive than air cargo. So this is, we have to admit, our industry profiting from the disruptions related to, very much related to what's happening in the Middle East, the Red Sea, the Panama Canal, etc., that has made it very difficult for maritime to be as competitive as they were previously. So all of this gives us a financial performance, which I think is absolutely worth, popping the champagne. Yeah, we think that we will exceed $1 trillion in terms of revenue in 2025. Now, of course, costs at 940 billion are important, but they still leave us an operating profit, we think, of 67.5 billion. And you have some other key numbers at the bottom of this chart that you can consult later. And when we look at net, which tends to be, I think, the main focus, is then our profit is 36.6 billion net, and that gives us a profit margin of 3.6%. Now, 3.6 is not bad for our industry, yeah? I think we've never had a net profit margin much above 5, yeah? So really, it's not a bad profit margin, but in normal, I come from banking, right? So, when I talk to clients in the past and try to orient them towards industries that they should invest in, we obviously try to orient them towards industries that earn a double-digit net profit margin. So we are in the utility slice of net profit margins, and that is clearly too low in order for us to be as robust as we need to be, not only for our industry, but also for the rest of our value chain, who obviously all depend upon us. This is the revenue split, where the red is the passenger segment, blue is cargo, and yellow is ancillaries. So clearly, the passenger segment is what's generating the most of our profits. And here we see, the stellar performance that we've actually managed to pull off in this amazing industry of ours, where in the space of 3 years, we've managed to come up again at the sort of in line with historic performance. That's a very swift turnaround, and I don't know of any other industry where I've seen a similar performance. Per region, we get this picture where North America is the most profitable, followed by Europe, the Middle East, Asia Pacific, Latin America, and Africa in that order. But when we then look at per passenger, it's quite interesting to see that the order is slightly modified. So per passenger, the Middle East is earning almost $24, and North America almost 12, Europe 9, And these three are above the industry average of $7 per passenger. And the three regions that then therefore are below the industry average are Latin America, Asia Pacific, and Africa. Africa happily eking out a profit, but a slim $1 per passenger profit. So, yeah. Anyway, the reason why we show coffee beans here is that we do like to talk about our profits, our per passenger profits, in terms of how much a cup of coffee costs in different places. So now I think with $7 per passenger, maybe we can afford a large latte in Geneva with that price. So that's it. Thank you very much.